want us to send this friend that you have.
We are me and Deboe. We're an acoustic duo. We still haven't decided what genre we are.
No.
We're a mix of everything. Folk, rock, indie, singer-songwriters, whatever that means anymore.
Pleasantly aggressive sometimes, and pleasantly mellow.
Pleasantly aggressive,
that's all
yeah.
right.
Once at your side as lovers pass by and bloodline.
And as individuals, when did you decide you wanted to get into music?
Well, I picked up a guitar when I was about 7, I think, and from there it was just literally that was all I wanted to do. As long as I was playing guitar every day, I was going to be satisfied basically. So, but I started with a lot of classical stuff, and I did that right through to my teens. But I had a lot of influences, especially I've got 2 older sisters, and they had a lovely eclectic mix of music. So I was brought up on some of the indie stuff, and also I'm really into like Skunk Anansie and Kate Bush, so I had a nice a wash of genres. So yeah, so from there I kind of did, it was mainly like classical and a lot of singer-songwriting stuff as a soloist and with various bands, and it just became this constant thing that I knew I just didn't want to do anything else.
It might be a bit different for me. I think I came into guitar about 14. No particular influence of music playing from my parents, but both very passionate about music. And coming up in Liverpool in the 50s, and then my brother sort of played drums and things, so we had like those sorts of influences around the house. And then yeah, I just picked it up, had a couple of classical lessons, and then thought, nah, I want to play Buddy Holly and get into the Beatles, and that was basically it. So I'm self-taught, but I didn't sort of think about music as a thing until probably I was maybe 20, and then sort of started thinking, okay. And then we met each other sort of on the scene a little bit after that. And that was basically it, really. I just thought, if you're going to play music with someone, they should be, you know, groundbreaking and unusual, stand out and unique, and that was what Elise was for me.
Friend of mine. All that's behind us now that you found us again.
How did you come together to form me and Deboe?
It was, because when I first saw you perform, I was like absolutely in awe with a guitar style and everything, because it were just complete contrast to mine, and I was like, I couldn't believe it, because, you know, a lot of people, they always say, you know, the stereotype is very softly, and when I saw the way you held it very sick, you could see like some of her influences, kind of your guitar right up at the top, quite similar to myself, and I was like, that's great, that. And I think you then took me around Liverpool, didn't you? And we didn't have a name at the time when we started. We just thought we'd jam each other's songs, you know, and actually go to different open mics and whatever. And it just snowballed, didn't it?
Yeah, we tried to get some gigs in places. I think I remember saying, do you know what, should we try and get some gigs together, and going to those venues and them saying, oh, we can give you like 4 or 5 pints or something. And I remember at that time saying to myself, no, actually, we can do something.
We wanted to do it seriously, so we thought, well,
yeah,
we'll
and we sort of pushed a little bit of a scene ourselves, really, by demanding that people should play.
Well, we give them a fee,
and
didn't
pay for performance, and
Yeah.
so that was quite a big thing, and that maybe gave us the power to think, actually, we can take this a little bit further, and we can be taken seriously.
Did you ever doubt like going down a creative route, or were you always like just wanting to pave your own way? Because it's so easy to just get into the mundane, like, and just think, well, I'll go down like the more like academic, secure routes, or were you always like, well, I want to do music and I want to be an artist, and we'll do it, regardless of what.
We were delusional, definitely, and we were like, we want to be artists.
I think that's it, 'cause I think from just with our backgrounds, like I've always been taught, make sure you can like graft. If you want to do what you want to do, just make sure you know.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of like juggled with that as well, and you know, like having a part-time job to kind of fund it initially, and then you take the risk of just throwing it in. But when we started, I think doing it, you know, self-employed and getting stuck in, because we love the live music for us, like live performance is what we love.
I think early on though, I think we realised that there were so many different elements to just being a musician. Like, you know yourself, you have to think about the business elements, your profession elements, and how you're perceived, and longevity, and all of those things are really important to us. So I think that the teaching element, we do mentoring, and we do all sorts of things. Elise does engineering and is producing all the stuff at the moment. So maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were like, we're going to actually have to learn a craft. and when it comes to maybe not performing, we can do other things, and I think that's why we've been able to sustain it.
Definitely. And I remember when I first saw you play, it was at Johnny Sand's acoustic night.
Oh, yeah.
That night, like, you know, the afternoon in the courtyard. And I think I played, and then I sat down, and you know when your family's there and they're all trying to talk to you and be like starting conversations and that. And I remember you getting up and like being like, oh, they look cool, and like still chatting away, and then like you started playing, and I was just like, you know when your ear is just like is fixated on something, and whatever anyone was saying to me, I just couldn't take it in, because I was just, my ear was fixated on you both. You have such an energy and like a confidence when you perform. Like, has that always been like that? Do you see yourselves as confident performers?
I think on stage you get away with coming across. I think pre-performance.
I hide behind Elise most of the
No,
time.
vice versa. I think
Metaphorically and physically.
There's always nerves. I think no matter where you go, there's nerves. But I think once we get going, it's you kind of.
Yeah, I think it is. It's like I'm assured every time I play on stage with Elise. I feel we're okay.
Yeah. I also forget where we are as well, because we just
tune out,
stuck in, and then sometimes we can tune out.
It's almost like a mission. I think we get on, we plug it in, and we're just so like let's just do it focused. And maybe that's been, sometimes we've had to get through gigs, you know, because sometimes they've been not the greatest, and maybe that's how we then focus for the other ones. It's almost like we just completely, you know, you're looking for that finish line, and that's what, not that we don't enjoy it, but that we're very focused on it.
When you're writing together, do you write together, or do you write separately? Like, how does that look like when you're writing your music?
Different. We have different approaches. Someone can come with maybe a riff. It tends to be, a lot of the time it's music first, isn't it? And then the lyrics tend to come second, I think, to that. But yeah, one of us will have an idea. I think we just bounce off one another, don't we? So it'll start with either a riff or maybe a melody line over something, and then we just adapt it. 'Cause I think that's what we realised when we first started gigging together and jamming. We obviously adapted each other's songs, and what I noticed was how it lifted it, you know, especially like my own, because obviously you can just envisage it as you playing the guitar, but then like the additional stuff that Sarah was arranging over the top, it just gave it a completely different, just a different sound.
Rubbish.
And yeah, I was like, what have I done?
He was like, please turn it down.
And vice versa.
Same
like,
for me. Yeah. You're a Kickstarter. She's very much. I like need a bit of a turn up to sort of get going. I'm able to sort of just say, change that, turn that round, completely take that out, but then put that in.
And how much do you think like your identity is like involved in your creativity and your creative outputs in your songwriting?
A lot, I would say.
I'd say a lot, yeah. I'd say a lot.
I think probably because we're honest to who we are. I think in that sense, everything that we do, it comes out. So the songwriting, and it's not a particular style, it's our style, and it is quite, when you hear us, even if we play other songs, other people's songs, we still have a very sort of particular style that is unique to us. So maybe part of that character and is enveloped in everything that we do. So,
I think particularly as well in like women in music and everything, it's even though it's so diverse, there is still that thing where you sometimes have to prove yourself a lot more as a woman, like in the music industry. I think you do realise that definitely identifying as kind of like a minority area in the diversity, you know, in the music scene, that does kind of define like the music you write, I'd say.
Being part of the LGBT community, have you ever come up against any discrimination or challenges while just being yourselves and just working and writing and
Yeah, of course we have. Of course, yeah, we definitely have, yeah. Especially when we first started out, because we'd turn up at, you know, various venues, and it'd be packed, and you could hear, in some venues we didn't always have monitors, so we could always hear like what people were saying or whatever. And when we first started, because we weren't the most, shall we say, femme, dressed with our acoustic guitars.
Shocking.
We weren't softly, you know, Laura Marling style. We were gigging, and we you know, we come across sometimes, I think they say, well, one guy said it was too aggressive, didn't he?
Yeah.
One guy said it was too aggressive what we were doing. Everyone was dancing behind him and jumping, and he came over and just said it was slightly aggressive. Could we do something more mellow? And it was a Saturday night, wasn't it? And we've been like...
in the wrong bar.
Yeah.
We've been called like lesbian feminists and
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what even that means.
I mean,
anymore.
I think,
We're just
well, actually,
being, you know,
he didn't realise he said it, didn't he? So this guy said it, obviously, in the audience, and I actually stopped, I told Sarah to stop playing, and I asked him which lesbian feminist he was referring to, and he left.
I mean, we come
So,
across it, I mean, just in general, in everyday life, don't you?
Yeah.
There is so much sort of anger, for some reason, at people that aren't a particular type of person, colour, whatever it might be, creed. Everyone just seems so angry, and then you've got the other side, everyone's just so angry. And I've been angry too, because I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so you
You
sort
do
of
get defensive, don't you?
Yeah, I used to be I used to really take it. I mean, quite rightly, you know,
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
But you can change people's perceptions and perspectives in
By
different
not changing
ways.
yourself, because I think it does
Yeah.
make you think, should you change how you appear? And the answer's no, isn't it?
And also, women in music, I think we have more issue with that on a sort of monthly basis. Don't
Being
we?
women in music, yeah, definitely.
That's a massive one.
I think it's the androgynous side of it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the people that have said it to us, it's men. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's men that have these, you know, very direct opinions of what they see and hear.
We've done gigs. When we toured just before the lockdown, and we took a drummer out with us. He's great, by the way. Shout out to Hughes. But I'd arrived early for the sound check, and then Mark had arrived, and then Elise eventually, because she's always fashionable.
Hey, that's so wrong. It's always you.
And the engineer straight up to Mark, you know, what would you like to do for your sound check, you know, and that's just
And Mark
like,
just pointed to us and went, you need to speak to these. And he went, okay. And then he asked us a question and then continued
Straight to
to
look at
talk
Mark
and
and that's
converse.
just one of the things I can remember, and this is only in the last year.
And not much discrimination either, but we've been asked, obviously because we're two women, we're part of the LGBTQ community, we always get asked, even in like film interviews, so you've worked together a long time, are you together on a personal level? Like, obviously there's that
We
assumption.
get that all the time, yeah.
And I always wonder, like, is that question asked to male duos
Or
or,
DJs,
you know, yeah,
two guys,
yeah.
no, that's never get asked.
Oh, no, not at all.
It's not as
at all.
appealing, is it?
It's everywhere, isn't it?
It
But I
is.
guess like
It's just ingrained in society, isn't it? I don't think we talk about it enough. I think it becomes like a hashtag or a trend. It just becomes a thing, and we don't really, I don't think we highlight the issues.
It's also like, and obviously because you're gigging, you don't want to put a foot out of place because you want to keep a reputation to keep, you know, to keep working basically. So you kind of keep a lot of it to yourself and just kind of like take it in and deal with it.
And in some really strange, diverse universe, I'm glad that we've done what we did maybe 10 years ago, because when you go to an open mic night now, there are more girls that rock up, you know, and they're sort of 17, 18, 19, 20. I just think, yes,
Yeah.
that's great that it's so much. We used to go to open mic nights and acoustic sessions, and we'd be the only women.
yeah.
And I used to just think, why? Like, there are women, there are girls that play, you know, and is it the environment they're not into, or do they feel like they can't do it? And so I'm so pleased that it's changing.
And with everything opening back up again, hopefully soon, have you got anything in like the pipeline that you've been working on?
We're looking at an autumn release. I'm going to release some singles along the way.
Late autumn.
And we're working with we've been approached. It's 9x9 Records,
Yeah.
isn't it? To release it vinyl. So that's an exciting time for us to
Nice
actually get
record
it
out, yeah.
to actually get it on a vinyl. So yeah, that's what we're working towards this year. And most importantly, gigging, like just playing and touring as much as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Like.
We've not had a record out. We've always put it out in like sort of EP version or
Drips and
a
drabs,
few
yeah.
sort of tracks. So to actually have a record going out it'll be really nice. And we're actually, because of the last one, we're able to sort of think about how we want to do it, and we're really thinking about the sound and where we can go from it. Sort of growing, I suppose, get a bit older, and then just sort of evolving, maturing, let's say that. Cut that last one out. We're not getting older, we're just maturing, mellowing. We're mellowing nicely.
Tables turn, lessons learned with all you've been. Like the storm turns to sand, this flame let you in.
My name is Callie Crighton. I'm a 22-year-old music artist and producer. I make like kind of 80s synthwave visual music.
Soaking in the air, getting the twilight hour breeze. Feeling like a lunatic, a mile on the run from the laser, please.
When did you decide that you wanted to be a musician?
I think I've always known that I wanted to be a musician. I think ever since I was like a tiny kid, I remember being like 4 years old. I used to have the box set of all of Kylie Minogue's music videos and all of Madonna's, and I used to just watch them and be like, I want to be a pop star. I've always known it's what I've wanted to do. I started writing songs when I was like 6 or 7, and then when I was 15, I got a job in this burger and waffle shop. And I worked there making milkshakes and serving waffles, and with that money I bought a microphone and then taught myself how to produce on GarageBand.
And you write and you record like all your music and you produce it. What is your like writing process like?
I mean, it's different for each song. Normally it starts out with a visual, so I'll have something in my head and I'll think of a scenario. I think a lot of my songs tell stories. They're not really about like love or relationships. Like songs like The Laser Police. I just imagine driving through this huge synth city in a car being chased by like laser police, and it was very synthwave, retro, but also futuristic at the same time. I love retrofuturism. Sometimes I'll produce a riff and a beat and a hook, and then I'll write over that, but it really just depends.
It's so interesting, so different for every person, isn't it, how it starts?
Totally.
And you have such like a clear aesthetic as well, and like such a polished artistry.
Thank you.
Has it always been like that, or do you feel like it's been a journey to get to where you are now?
I think I've always known who I am on the inside. It's just been sometimes a tough time learning the right way to express that. I feel like only recently am I truly projecting exactly what I have into my head onto the music and the videos and the way that I release it.
You have such a strong like 80s aesthetic as well. Where does that come from?
I feel like I was actually in lockdown 1 talking to myself. I sat myself down and was like, Callum, why are you into the 80s so much? What is it about the 80s that inspires you? And I honestly think the reason might be is because in the 80s a lot of people went through like a tough time, and culture was changing and people's viewpoints were changing and a lot of things happened. And because of that, people kind of wanted to escape the real world. So a lot of 80s culture, whether it be in music or films or anything like that, it's based very heavily in escapism. And I think because in my childhood, I was often not really happy with who I was. Secretly, deep down, I'd act like a really happy kid, but I never felt like I fit in anywhere. And I had a really tough time in school, and I got bullied quite a lot and didn't really have many real friends and all that kind of jazz.
Then I grew up and nothing changed, but dreams of mine considered strange. Whispers in the dark would say, when we get old, we hide away, but you can dare to run astray, and maybe then you'll finally grow.
Do you feel like you escape in your music when you're creating your music, when you're performing it? Do you feel like you're taken elsewhere, or do you think like it's something you bring everyone in? It's not just you escaping, it's like everyone.
That's a really good question. I think when I'm making the music, I feel like I escape to somewhere else, and when I'm doing the music video, I definitely feel like I escape to somewhere else. But then as soon as I share it and it's been made and I release it, I feel like I bring everyone along with me. I feel like when you're listening to The Laser Police or watching the music videos or doing any of that kind of stuff, or if you come to a live show, I like to kind of transport people into a world. I like to do costume changes and interludes, and I like to get people involved, and I just think it's really fun to bring them into that place, because if I've got the means to do that, how fun would it be to give everyone a taste of like the world that I go to when I daydream or when I imagine, or the world that I wanted to live in when I was a kid and wasn't being authentic to who I really was.
Well, I get this feeling in my bones, something I can't yet understand. I realize this is the truth. It's time for me to make a stand.
Do you think being like an out artist now, whatever that looks like, I think the term out artist is kind of, it's strange,
it's weird,
but
isn't
like
it?
I don't know how else to like, you know, articulate it.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that you had to be something else to try and be a musician?
I wanted to be myself really badly, and I couldn't at first completely be myself, because obviously I think I came out around the time I started producing music, but I still was not confident enough to change the colour of my hair or wear a dress or, you know, a funky outfit or wear makeup or grow my unibrow out. And so I think at first I definitely wasn't who I was on the inside, but I feel like when you're an out artist, you have this innate responsibility because you are a walking political statement. being the most authentic to yourself that you can possibly be is absolutely the best way to do that. And I think that's why right now I'm really striving to like be as authentically me and be like, what you see is what you get. This is who I am, this is my identity, and hopefully kids can look up to me and feel the same way, because I wish I would have had someone like me to look up to when I was a kid. And I just didn't. So that's what I'd be happy if that was all I was just someone for kids to relate to when they feel like they can't relate to anyone else.
I've thought it before, like when you think about artists that are out now, and this, I don't know if it's like a correlation, but they seem to sort of rise up as sort of this ambiguous figures, and then once they've got that success, they then come out. And I don't know if that's like just part of their personal journey, which is, you know, absolutely fine. And but I wondered what your opinion of that is. Like, do you think that these sort of things, people suppress them and then wait for the success and then come out just in case it hinders the success?
Well, absolutely. And then, you know, it's a tale as old as time. You hear it about George Michael being told by his record label not to come out because he had so many female fans who were in love with him, and he was told it would hinder his career, and he had to kind of make it first before coming out. You know, Lil Nas had his first hit before coming out. I think there's artists who I'm not going to name names who are most definitely probably gay or queer or in the LGBT community who haven't yet come out because maybe they've been told that it would hurt their career, or maybe that's just how they feel, because it's definitely much easier to be straight in the world, or even, you know, if you're not straight, it's much easier to just act it and just kind of not mention sexuality, not mention that, and not be put into a category or a box. I understand that that's what they have to do, but I think it's also really important to have queer artists who openly and outwardly say it and show that you can make it being queer and that you don't have to pretend to be straight and then come out once you've made it. Jojo Siwa,
don't get me started.
I'm so proud of that girl. I love her. She's going to be an astronomical change to like the way children perceive
I think so. Like,
LGBT people.
It's just something that, like, can you imagine when we were sort of her age or younger, her fans are so young. Can you imagine having someone like that, like your idol coming out, like before you even know really what it means
and then instantly
out.
Being gay isn't this taboo 18 plus subject. It's something that a children's entertainer is openly gay and has a girlfriend, and suddenly people see, you know, a same-sex relationship as tame and as acceptable for children to see as they see a heterosexual relationship. Is me forgetting what it's called. What do they call them? Straight people? I don't know.
You recently released The Laser Police, which was, you know, so well received. It was incredible, like everything, that the whole world that you created with it. What was the whole vision around The Laser Police, and what's it like also a part of? Because I hear there's more to it all.
Yeah, The Laser Police is the first instalment in my new and debut EP that is called Laser Police the Musical. And basically the concept of the musical is there's 4 tracks that all tell a story. And each song is a different part of the story, and The Laser Police is actually the last part of the story. It comes first in the EP, but I'm releasing a short film with each music video in that kind of tells an overarching narrative.
Do you have a favourite song, or a song that you feel like you're most proud of on the EP?
Yeah, so there's this song called Universal Hand, and I am so proud of that song. It's the first time where I've sat and listen to a song and it's evoked emotion within me, because I think a lot of the time I'll write these kind of crazy bops and they're like fun and you can dance, but I don't think I've ever been good at evoking emotion. But Universal Hand, like, it really like hits me when I listen to it, even though it's my own song, and I feel like I've finally written and produced the song that I've always wanted to write and produce.
What do you think will be your like I've made it moment?
This is gonna sound so cheesy, but every night before I go to sleep, I always look up at the sky. I believe in like manifesting, like, you know, what you put out to the universe has to come back to you, what goes up must come down, you know, ask, believe, receive, and then go and bloody do it. And I think the last thing I think of every night before I go to bed is I look to the sky and I look at all the stars, and you know when you're on stage in an arena and you imagine, and you can see the phone flashes, I imagine the stars are like phone flashes from people's phones, and that I'm stood in this massive arena, and one day, mark my words, I'll either do it or die trying, I'm going to be stood in an arena and then see those flashes and then realise that it's what I've imagined every night before I've gone to sleep. And I think in that moment I'll realise that I've made it. And I just really hope I get to see that day, because that's what I've been working towards my entire life.
Take a moment and I know it'll set you free. Don't slack 'cause you're far ahead. Wing mirror being chased by the laser.
I'm Felix. I'm an actor, a performer, a writer. I co-founded a theatre company called Transcend Theatre, which I wrote the current play we're working on called How to Kill a Rose, and I also act in it, which will be on at the Unity Theatre on the 23rd of October.
Wow, that's some CV.
Thanks.
That's so cool. When did you start becoming interested in acting and writing?
So like I've always like done acting my whole entire life, but when I came out as trans, I kind of felt that the industry didn't really have a place for me. I wasn't really getting roles that I felt represented in, felt like they were relevant to what's going on in the world. So I started writing roles for people like me, writing roles for myself, and just making sure I was telling stories authentically. You know, theatre should be about real life experiences, but it's moved away from that. You know, what are people learning from an inspector calls? You know, when they could be learning about like real stories that are happening to real people. And my play is about the high domestic abuse rates within the trans community, because that's something that's very prevalent in my world, in a lot of people I know world, but it's not talked about. And if it is talked about, it's not talked about correctly and authentically. Often when there's trans stories told, they're not told by trans people. Like we see things like The Danish Girl, which is the only mainstream really trans story that was told by Eddie Redmayne, who's like Eton educated cis straight man. Do you know what I mean? So it's, you know, even though there might be more visibility of trans stories, it's not always told by trans people, which, like, you know, implicates a lot of violence, because it kind of implies that trans is something that can be played, that is something that can be taken on and taken off when they leave the stage or the set, which isn't true whatsoever.
And when you were writing How to Kill a Rose, like what sort of themes did you want to cover when you were writing it?
So for me, it was important that us being trans is important to the context but irrelevant to the storyline. So we don't actually talk about it within it, because I think it's not important to the narrative, but it is important to why it matters and why it's being told, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to think about themes of, it's written half in spoken word poetry, half in dialogue, so I think it was really important to have that mix of being able to tell things not in a triggering way and being able to tell things symbolically, and that's why the rose comes into it, because the rose represents the innocence, and we slowly see the rose, like, you know, get worse and die over time. And I think it was important for me that I didn't just make like something that was really traumatizing and opening people's traumas, but instead provided an opportunity to see the signs in a not heterosexual cis-normative relationship. My inspiration comes from a lot of different places, and that's why it's quite hard for me to write. I can't really just sit down and write. I have to see something that inspires me, whether that's like a raindrop on a window or a conversation I hear by strangers when they walk me past. My inspiration really does come from all different things, and yeah, so it can make it really hard to write. Or I'll just hear like a rhyme scheme in my head, and I'll just hear a line and be like, oh, that's something to go off, do you know what I mean? And once I get in the flow, like I really get in the flow, but it is hard for me to go back and edit my poems, because it can be quite hard to put myself back in the mind space that I was in when I was writing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love spoken word poetry. For me, it's all about like the rhythm within it as well, you know. I don't really like it when it's written down. My poetry's to be heard, not read. Yeah, definitely. It's like lightning bolts, electricity makes me feel, but the thundercloud has lifted, and I can finally see what's real.
Have you got any plans for Transcend as, you know, as things start opening up and the world is actually, you know,
It's coming back. So a lot of Transcenders, we're not just telling stories on stage, we're going into the communities and making sure that the stories we're telling are being told to the right people. So we have good ties with people like White Pass, with their Gyro and the Action Youth Group. So we like are planning to do workshops with them about how to kill a rose, about how to spot signs of abuse, because obviously they're in the demographic that our play is aimed towards. So yeah, that'll be exciting when we can really get into them youth groups and making sure that we're helping people through our art, which is really the aim of Transcend. I came out when I was 14, so like 6 years ago, and even then I've seen the attitudes change so much between what it was like then and what it was like now. I think, you know, social media has played a good part in it, in, you know, people being able to share their views easier. You know, it can come with the bad parts of that, obviously, but, you know, it can come with the really great parts. And, you know, all the people that I've encountered that have really had a problem with it, the vast majority have been older. You know, that, you know, people need to give it to the kids more, like, especially people who are even younger than us. Like, they're so accepting. Like, when I was like, yeah, my pronouns are he, him, my name's Felix, like, I never had, they were like, yeah, and pick it up straight away, you know what I mean? That doesn't, because they haven't been taught that that's not normal.
Yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with being trans. Being trans isn't the hard part. It's how society views you, which is the difficult part. And, you know, your self-confidence and self-image comes with time, and that's something you can work on, but it's hard to work on the views of the general public all at the same time.
Of course.
But I think our generation has definitely come a long way, and I think people are using their voice and speaking up more than ever.
Please listen to me when I say you are loved, accepted, and valid, even if you may not feel it. In the place you are, know that you will never be alone.
I never really chose to get into the activism I do. Like, you know, I do a lot of speeches. I'm an organiser for Trans Pride Liverpool and Transgender Day of Remembrance. And I never really, like, thought that was something that I'd do, but it was something that I kind of fell into and saw how supportive people were when I started to use my voice and be able to express my thoughts in a certain way. And I think that made me, like, want to do it more and really, like, feel the buzz of wanting to make change. I think what people don't realise a lot is, like, the joy in activism. Like, I think it can be very focused on being sad, and obviously the reality of most things is quite sad when it comes to social change, but there needs to be that hope, because what are we building a better world for if it's not to be happy?
Do you have anything coming up that you're working on that you're going to be sharing, like, in the future? Writings or performances or...?
There's a few things in the works. The next Transcend project we're working on is a rap musical called Be Gay Do Crime.
Stop.
That is
I love it.
that I'm writing, thanks. So it's like all just based off real people I know. I'm like writing it with the real people I know whose real stories it is, you know. It includes some of my experiences. I like, you know, art forms where you don't need a full production, you don't need a big budget. It can just be you with something to say or something to sing, a microphone and an audience.
Yeah.
I think that's really special.
I implore you all to find out what's going on in this world, but to not let the negativity define your life. Use it to fuel your voice and to make a difference.